Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud. Today we're talking about the new moon in the third 10 degrees section of Taurus, an algol new moon. So we're going to be taking a deep dive into Taurus significations, specifically the third 10 degree section. We're going to talk about algol today and the story of Medusa and Perseus. We're going to take a look at the astrology on how it's going to unfold in the coming weeks ahead. We're going to talk about Venus and Gemini and malefic enclosure and out of bounds. But we're just going to spend some time together. I hope that you're having a wonderful Friday afternoon as I'm recording this. If you're here in the chat with me today, let me know in the chat. Let me know if you're hanging out. It's always nice to see your smiling faces. We've got Rachel stopping in from Roanoke, Virginia. Hope you're doing well, Rachel. Happy belated birthday to you, Rachel. We've got our fellow Taurus here. Sent me some pictures of some beautiful Lord of the Rings gifts. I'm so excited for you. It's nice to see fellow Tolkien enthusiasts getting excited about books. So we need to get more excited about books, don't we? I think in this digital age that is clamoring for our attention, just sitting down with a good book and being in our own headspace and in our own imagination without just being yelled at by social media and algorithms and things like that. I mean, I'll tell you what, I'd spent some time outdoors this morning, right before this broadcast. Actually, I was starting to get overwhelmed by all the noise in the collective, in the social media and the news, and all of the challenges that we're experiencing, which are can be very stressful, I think, on some levels, like with just what's going on politically, socially, and getting frustrated with, the unfairness of a lot of it. And just needed to go outside and ground myself. And it's really nice. Like, this is something that I can recommend as a Taurus moon for this new moon. How do we ground ourselves back in nature? And also, yeah, you're very welcome, Rachel. It's so nice to see you here today. Happy, I think today, if I'm not mistaken, but happy 100th birthday to Dr. David, or Sir David Attenborough. Is probably doctor, right? Sir David Attenborough. 100 years on this beautiful planet. Oh my gosh, I've been inundated with a lot of the negativity in the collective, but talk about a beacon of light, right? Someone who has spent his time well on this planet, advocating for the creatures and the ecosystems that may not have a voice, and showing us the beauty of this wonderful planet that we inhabit, and kind of showing us what we're fighting for when we're trying to protect it, when we're getting the righteous indignation and things like that. It's so that we can preserve this beautiful, beautiful planet and all the diversity of species that inhabit it. I mean, what a life well lived. So I what a treasure. Happy birthday, Sir David Attenborough. And I hope your legacy is going to be something that I think inspires generations to come. Yeah, Rachel says he's such a fabulous Taurus. He is. He is a fabulous Taurus. He has what I think has a Mercury in Aries 3, like really getting passionate and getting people on the side of conservation and ecology, and of getting excited about the planet. I mean, what a great use of all of that, right? Just an inspiration for sure. All right, friends, a couple of announcements before we dive into this today. Of course, we're talking new moon in Taurus 3. You can find me over at spencermichaud.com, and you can find offerings if you need some help. If you need just someone to listen, someone to give you some context as far as taking a look at your chart and saying, what does fate have to say about what I'm experiencing? I'm a believer that there's some things in life that are difficult to change, but there's a lot of things that we can through our foresight and our knowledge. And by being able to see what is changeable in our lives and what isn't, that can help us to steer us in the right direction, right? And also just getting a different perspective on the things that we're experiencing can be really valuable. That's a really valuable part of astrology. So if you need some guidance, if you need someone to just to validate the things that you're going through and validate your experiences, and also help you make a plan if you're needing help with guidance and manifesting the best possible version of your life and yourself, go over to spencermichaud.com and sign up for a reading today. You can also find some pre-recorded webinars at the store at spencermichaud.com, where you can get the Decanic webinars that I talk about and reference here in the show quite often each week. You can get deep dives into these signs and the mythology and the fixed stars and the tarot cards associated with all of it. It's kind of just a big amalgamation of all the things that I've been learning over the course of my 2-decade plus studies in this type of thing. So check that out. You can also find a series called Dignity and Devotion with my beautiful partner Tanya Andrews, where we talk about the 7 traditional planets. And each of those webinars is over 4 hours long, where we're talking about astrological magic, how to elect charts to be able to capture some of the good energy and help to balance out some of the challenging things in our life. And then there's also a Stars and Cards webinar where I'm talking about the connection between tarot and astrology and breaking down sort of the esoteric relationships of the tarot with astrological placements. So check that out. You can also find my beautiful partner over at Third Coast Mojo on Etsy. So if you need some planetary materia, if you need a little boost in smoothing out your fate and your relationship with your planets, with your stars, with life, I put on a bunch of Third Coast Mojo materia before I went live today. Again, I was feeling a little overwhelmed and I was feeling the malefic enclosure of Venus a little bit. We'll talk about that today and how that can lead to some frustration and just maybe some discomfort, whether it's in our bodies or with the collective. But I put on some of Tanya's materia. Here she's got Mars and Capricorn Blockbuster. If you need to bust through any blockages that you may have in your life and get through to the other side. Sun and Leo, Easy Life. I'm wearing a little bit of that today, like smoothing the process, helping you feel comfortable in your own skin. Say, hey, let's just be free to be ourselves. Mercury and Virgo, Hermes Harvest is one. It's great for concentration. It's great for communication. And then this is one I've been really loving with these difficult aspects, the Venus and Libra Serene Queen. One that can kind of, turn down the volume, can turn down the anxiety that we sometimes experience with our nervous system. No, this is something I struggle with sometimes with some really heavy Virgo placements in my chart. A little bit of anxiousness, a little bit of worry. And the Serene Queen sort of smooths that out and helps you kind of see things from multiple perspectives. So it's just a little boost. So check her out on Third Coast Mojo. She does great work. She's a true artist when it comes to these things, and go support her. Okay, you can also subscribe to the newsletter if you want to get updates on when I'm going live here, or when I'm releasing new classes, or when Tanya's releasing new products through Third Coast Mojo. Subscribe to the newsletter. There's a link in the description of this video or the podcast, and you also get a discount off of a reading if you sign up for that. You can also support the channel by purchasing a super chat today, which is part of the YouTube kind of experience. Or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and become a patron of the channel at buymeacoffee.com. All right, announcements done. Got some more people stopping in. Oh my goodness, Dimphy is here. What's up, Dimphy? How you doing? Says hi, Spencer. Nice you mentioned his birthday, David Attenborough. Dimphy is one of my favorite gardening friends from the Netherlands. We've connected and shared some pictures of our gardens over the years. And I like that David Attenborough drew you out, Dimphy. So I hope everything's going well your way and that your garden is beautiful and vibrant with life right now. And let's see if we can keep carrying on David Attenborough's legacy. One of my absolute heroes, 100%. That's the kind of way I would love to be remembered going forward. And then those are big shoes to fill, but I think all of us can play even a small role in doing that, just by taking care of each other, taking care of the life that is around us, even if it's a small patch of land near you, even if it's something, the woods that you go walk in. Maybe you bring a trash bag with you and pick up some garbage along the way, or whenever you're replacing invasive species in your yard with native pollinator habitat. All of those are carrying on the legacy of Sir David Attenborough. So, Dimphy, nice to see you. Hope everything's going well your way, friend. Okay, let's talk about this new moon. This is going to be happening on the 16th of May. So we've got, what is today? Today's the 8th. We've got a couple days. We're back and getting in the swing of being in advance, like a week in advance. So preparing you for future astrological experiences coming up. Dimphy says, even the little baby robins in the garden at the moment. Ooh, nice. I love it. I love being able to see the circle of life in the garden and in the woods and all of that. So yeah, keep on keeping on with that, Dimphy. Okay, new moon, Taurus 3, 25 degrees of Taurus. This is, let's bring it up. I'm going to bring up a little bit so you can see it on the stage here. So here is the new moon in Taurus. You can see here we've got the new moon co-present with Mercury. Okay, so Mercury is still part of the conversation. We have a new moon conjunct Algol. We'll talk about Algol. It's a fixed star at around 25 to 26 degrees of Taurus. A really intense fixed star, one of the more challenging ones to work with, I guess you could say. It has its advantages and it has its, I guess, its uses. It has its protections, but it is one that we have to be very cautious about working with. It is a very protective star. Utilizing it to protect others is, I think, something that can be worked with a little bit safer rather than trying to take on its power for yourself or to your own advantage. If you could use it to protect yourself, I guess you could say, but it's very powerful in being able to, I don't know, drive away evil. But it is a strong feminine force, almost like the force of nature itself. And if you've spent any time in nature, you know it can be a wonderfully supportive, protective, beautiful force. It can also be a very wild, chaotic, humbling force. It can be something that deserves an enormous amount of respect. Algol is the blinking star in Medusa, in the constellation associated with the severed head of Medusa. So we'll talk about the Medusa story today a little bit. And I'll read to you a little excerpt from The Eternal Drama by Edward Edinger, which talks a lot about maybe how to work with that energy potentially through the mirror of Perseus. We have this new moon also sextile Jupiter, so it is making a whole sign sextile here. You can see with Jupiter, I'm just kind of circling that. It is separating from the sextile from Jupiter, but it is nice to have a benefic planet that it's in such good shape, like Jupiter in its exaltation, that is witnessing and trying to give over its testimony to the new moon. In Hellenistic astrology, they have a concept called witness and testimony. The ancients believed that these planets were deities that were in a somewhat of a cosmic courtroom that were giving witness and testimony to the fate of the natives on the earth, right? So we are seeing that Jupiter is saying, hey, I would like to be able to provide abundance to this new moon. I would like to be able to provide ideas about what to do if we have more than we need, or what to do if we are lacking, right? That decan of Cancer has a lot to do with scarcity versus surplus. And what do we do if we have more than we need? What do we do when we're kind of having that overflowing cup, as Austin Coppock would say in his beautiful book, 36 Faces? So that is something that is potentially positive here. We have Venus and Mercury in mutual reception within this new moon. So Venus is visiting Mercury's temple of Gemini, and Mercury has gotten renewed as of the new moon. It hasn't happened quite yet. It's going to happen about a day or two before the new moon. Mercury is in Taurus, in the domicile of Venus. So there's this secret communication, this secret helping behind the scenes of Mercury and Venus. And that is a good thing, okay? Because Venus is also a malefic enclosure. And we'll break that down, but that is a place that is difficult for Venus to be in. Venus is also out of bounds, I believe, at this point as well. Venus is out of bounds and in malefic enclosure. Rachel says, Algol has already been coming through for me in a good way. A friend who has been experiencing stalking, etc., has come to me for some protective magics. There you go. Perfect use of that energy, right? Being able to utilize the very powerful protective and sometimes destructive energy of Algol, but to destroy something that is hurting someone else rather than to be self-destructive. I think that's one of the things I've been trying to come to terms with the Algol energy, because the warnings around Algol are potentially losing our heads, getting so passionate that we are chaotic, right? That we're not able to control the strong, I guess, wild feminine impulses of nature, right? I don't know, there's some things in nature where you see just something is growing out of control. You've got things that if the ecosystem isn't healthy, there can be this really destructive quality to it. But in the way that Rachel is speaking towards it, being able to direct that energy towards a specific purpose and one that is protective of something innocent, right? And I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. So good luck with that, and be careful. Like, right? Be careful. I know Rachel's got a good, nice relationship, I think, with that fixed star. So I think that's something that you might be able to wield that energy better than others, Rachel. Okay, so Venus in malefic enclosure. This, of course, this is Venus here having both malefics, Saturn and Mars, casting its ray on either side of the planet. There have been some experiences, I would say, with Venus in malefic enclosure this week that I've already kind of either been witnessing or experiencing myself. Yesterday, I went to a matinee to go see the Michael Jackson movie, the Michael Jackson biopic. I enjoyed it. I grew up in a time where Michael Jackson was a really mythical figure, I guess you could say. Like the story that they told in the movie was one of narrative crafting, I guess you could say. Like, I'm not someone who wants to completely dismiss the negative parts of Michael Jackson and the potential that he has for darkness as well as for light. I'm someone that is trying to hold both of those things and just witness it, and witness the enormous amount of impact and creative energy that he had, and also understand the potential for the dark impulses that he potentially experienced as well. So the point of that being is that the Venus in malefic enclosure energy, you could see the deep abuse that he experienced as a young person that maybe led to just an incredible output of creativity and light, the balance between those two things. But also, just on a personal level, I don't go to the movie theater very often, and it was so loud. It was just like being assaulted. It was just like being blasted with sound. It was like I was trying to do something nice, and I just was like overwhelmed with how ridiculously loud it was. And also like the 30 minutes of commercials and previews before the movie even started. Also, Venus in malefic enclosure, while I was trying to enjoy the movie, I really had to use the bathroom like the entire time, and I didn't want to miss anything. So it was like I was trying to enjoy something, but there were all these elements that were making it very uncomfortable. And I think this is one of the things that, when we're trying to go and do something nice, when we're trying to receive good energy, which is Venus can be a very receptive energy, there's some factors in place that can make it very challenging. And oftentimes they're very personal, like the Aries energy. Now this can have other manifestations as well. This could lead to confusion around ambiguities we have in our life with Venus and malefic enclosure. Venus in Gemini is often trying to harmonize the light and the dark side of ourselves, or of our shadow and of our ego and things of that nature. It can be difficult sometimes to harmonize the different parts of ourselves when Venus is in malefic enclosure. We may feel like we have to choose one or the other rather than let things be in the gray areas of life. So you may feel pressure right now to make a choice when really, once this energy starts to abate, you might not necessarily feel the same type of pressure that you would feel to make a choice. We'll talk a little bit more about Venus and Gemini in the third 10-degree section of Gemini, right? Where we see things so in black and white, where it feels like we have to be like the executioner, which is the reference in 36 Faces, the executioner's sword or the executioner's axe. Like we're feeling like we have to eliminate one of the possibilities or many of the possibilities to make something manifest, right? You see a lot of stories of the twins with Castor and Pollux. One twin is mortal, one is immortal. They have to share some of their time on Olympus and share time in the underworld. One has to sacrifice so that the other can live. It may feel like we just don't know what to sacrifice, or we feel like the sacrifice is too painful at this point with Venus and malefic enclosure. We may also be tempted to make a choice based on the out of bounds quality of Venus. When Venus is out of bounds, we may be experimenting with new ways of being, with new things that we're attracted to, with new likes and dislikes. And out of bounds planets sort of function in ways where they are not following the socially accepted norms, I guess you could say. They're maverick planets. That can be good for thinking outside the box. That can be good for coming up with new ideas. It can be challenging if we make permanent decisions based on that, that when Venus is back in bounds, we could look around and be like, this was a passing thing. This was a passing fancy. This was a passing discomfort, I guess you could say, with the Venus and malefic enclosure as well. And we have to just be careful of committing too heavily to things, because Venus also is going through a decan where the energy of the seasonal transition from the end of spring to summer is one of switching directions, of changing our minds. This is a decan where people often will make ultimatums and then have to change their mind and backtrack off of that because of new information, because they can't possibly follow through with it. I mean, think of what's going on politically with the president and his acronym, TACO, right? Trump always chickens out is what the kind of the thing is. Really, I see that as he makes ultimatums and draws lines in the sand and then has a change of heart because he can't follow through in the circumstances. That is spoken towards by the sun rising in declination, when it's rising through the ascent to the summer solstice, through the last sign of spring in Gemini. And then once it reaches the summer solstice, it's at its highest point, and the sun starts rising lower in the sky. It essentially changes direction as far as how high it rises in the sky each day. So there is this kind of shift. There is this change of heart. There is this, we need to make a choice. We need to let go of one option potentially to be able to manifest and give birth and bring something to fruition into Cancer from the transition from Gemini to Cancer. But I do think it's very important, while Venus is in malefic enclosure and out of bounds, to be very careful about making all or nothing statements, about casting ultimatums to ourselves or to others, of making choices that may be outside of the norm because we feel pressure to, I don't know, craft a new identity, I guess you could say too, with the pressure of both malefics in Aries, of saying, I have to state who and what I am, and I have to make a choice based on this. That's something that we could feel a lot of pressure towards with those two malefics enclosing Venus. So we may have to make some new starts. We may have to craft new identities, but I think we need to leave some room for new information to come in with this enclosure of Venus. So that is a really important part of this new moon in Taurus, because that is the planet that is hosting the new moon. Like we feel like we have to make a choice. We feel like we're trying to fix something that hasn't felt right for a potential long period of time. We're trying to heal something, I think, on some level. The third decan of Taurus is really, we'll speak to that in great depth. I'll show you some slides associated with that today from my planetary webinars. But there is a theme of repair. There's a theme of certain things going wrong that are outside of our control, natural forces that are hard to control, humility in the face of nature. And I just think that when we're trying to heal things, we need to be able to leave space for information to come to us, right? And we may just not have all of it yet. And that's where the patience of Taurus III comes in. Now, another part of this is we have Mars conjoining Chiron around this new moon. So here's Mars and Chiron. Excuse me for a second. Excuse me. Get a little drink of water. So this is an aversion to the new moon, which means it's not really witnessing that new moon, but it is that those two celestial bodies are coming together very close to the lunation. So I do think that that energy will be present in the sky. Maybe it's not related completely to the renewal of the moon in the heart of the sun in this case, but we may be feeling a wound that is sort of in the background that is difficult to reconcile with the other energy. Like we have a sextile between Venus, the host of this new moon, and that Mars and Chiron. There is a little bit of a pain in trying to convince people of our perspective. Mars may be wanting to put a lot of energy towards gathering support for whatever our vision is for ourselves, for how we identify, for how we put ourselves out into the world. And it could be a little painful. It could be like a little bit of a painful, like, well, I have to state this perspective, but it might be challenging to get people on board with it, with the conjunction with Chiron. It could bring up old wounds, old fears of rejection sensitivities. I know that, myself and my partner have experienced a lot of that in our youth growing up. Like a lot of people who are a little bit neurodivergent have experienced a lot of rejection in their youth, and that has made them really sensitized to any type of rejection. And this Mars conjoining Chiron could be a little bit of an extra sensitivity around that. And that might be making it difficult to see things from multiple perspectives, because we're like, well, why don't you just love me for who and what I am, rather than me having to see everyone else's perspective? That could be part of the malefic enclosure in Venus, with Venus as well. Uranus, Mercury, and the Sun are all nearing the bending of the nodes. So you could see here the nodes of the moon. Okay, that's an important distinction, because each planet has a node where it is crossing over the ecliptic in the southern or northern declination area. But the one that we use the most, I guess, in astrology is the nodes of the moon, because those are often associated with eclipses. In the way that traditional astrologers would look at those nodes, we are looking at a place of increase and a place of decrease. The north node, a place of increase, the south node, a place of decrease. So when a planet is moving at the bending of the nodes, it is hitting sort of a peak moment, whether it is a peak of increase where it starts to move towards decrease, which is what we're seeing here. This is, I believe, the north bending, where we're at the peak of increase. We're the furthest away that we can get from not the furthest, the square from the north node. And we're starting to see these planets move towards the south node of decrease. So we're going to see Uranus, that is really interesting to me, because Uranus is an outer planet that has a lot of social significations, right? Dove Girl is here. Nice to see you, Dove Girl. Hope everything's going well with you. I believe this is our friend Marietta. So welcome, friend. Hope everything's going well. Uranus has a social connotation to it, because it is a quote-unquote transpersonal planet. Oftentimes when Uranus is making important aspects, important omens in the sky, we feel it more on a collective level than on a personal level. That doesn't mean we don't feel it personally, because as above, so below, as within, so without, as collective, so personal oftentimes. But we might see some shakeups with our communications, with our information systems, when Uranus is making that square to the nodes. I hope, I guess just from a very subjective personal perspective, that a lot of the growth of the surveillance state, I guess you could say, through the increased investment in like AI and data centers and things like that, I think this could be a turning point for things like that, because we have seen this increase towards that. We've seen this increase towards investment in that from the billionaire class, I guess you could say. And we've been seeing a lot of pushback against that for good reason. And, David Attenborough would probably say, because it's destroying our ecosystems, it's destroying our waterways, it's destroying our farmland, it's destroying it's sucking up resources and creating more warming and noise pollution and all of these things, light pollution in the areas that these things are going in. So that could be one possibility. But it is moving towards a decrease, right? It is some kind of decrease that Uranus is going to be moving towards. Now, Mercury is going to be doing the same thing. Personally, with Mercury going towards the south node, we have to look at the Virgo and the Gemini areas of our life and the topics associated with that and see that we might be at a point of this is as far as we can grow with this. And now we have to start paring back and we have to start disseminating, I guess, what we have grown. Maybe we've been working behind the scenes on new ways of communicating. Maybe we have some new skills we've been cultivating. And this is the point now where we've at the peak of increase with that. Now we need to start sharing it with the world potentially. So that is another signification. The sun at the bending of the nodes. Leo is the house to look at as the domicile of the sun. There may be some kind of identity increase where we've been gaining in strength, gaining in power, gaining in a sense of self, and now we're moving towards sharing that with the world, or we're moving towards increasing our social consciousness and utilizing the identity that we've crafted in service of the collective. I think that's really important. I think that's a really important distinction to make when we are putting energy into crafting a powerful individual self. How do we utilize that individual self to serve our communities? One moment that got me in the Michael Jackson movie, and I totally understand the problematic dichotomies around this individual. I've studied this person for many, many years and have a lot of mixed feelings around it. But there was one moment where a younger, almost teenage Michael was singing at a carnival to a young person who was in a wheelchair. And that was the moment to me that just oh man, I started crying at that moment, because there was this the ability of music to be healing, the ability of music to uplift and some people's lives. And I know that for me, as a young person who grew up in the 80s, that was a time before a lot of the controversy was coming around, and just that music just brightened my day. And music is so powerful in that regard. So how do we become the best version of ourselves, potentially like maybe Michael Jackson in some regard, so that we can uplift others and use that light and that gift to uplift others? Now, again, it can go too far. We can become megalomaniacal about it. We can think that we are the source of that power, energy, etc., rather than a channel for it. I think when we keep in mind that we are channels for whatever that is, spirit, divine energy, the Tao, we can utilize it in service of the collective. One of the things that I enjoy about studying astrology is I have to constantly keep in mind and keep a humble mindset around it and say, I am studying this not to be the greatest astrologer who has ever lived or the most knowledgeable or discovering all these new techniques, quote unquote. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are valid. But to me, I study this so that I can help people, so that I can help people alleviate a little bit of their suffering by understanding what they're going through, understanding who they are, and understanding other people's experience as well, and being able to relate and harmonize with that. Those are the reasons to study. Those are the reasons to become a great musician. Those are the reasons to become knowledgeable in astrology. Those are the reasons to become good at anything, so that you can utilize those gifts to uplift the others in your society, in your communities, etc. And I think if you hold on to that when these planets are going through the bending of the nodes, you're going to have a much better experience, rather than if you are trying to cultivate that power, energy, resources in service of ego gratification. Then what happens when things go to the bending of the nodes is life starts to come in and says, you know what? You're not necessarily allowed to hoard all of those things. Here's some experiences that are going to knock you down a peg or two. So if you go in with the intention of sharing those things with others, of uplifting, utilizing those gifts, not in the service of self, but in service of the collective, you become much more powerful and much more intentional, right? Rather than feeling like, oh my God, what is life trying to do to me? Becoming a victim of life, right? How do we utilize that energy intentionally and work with the bending of the nodes, working with the south node. I think this is another thing to think about with astrology is like, we're not going to be able to change the intentions of the planets. The planets and the points have their own goals and intentions. But when we come into alignment with those intentions, then it's an experience of going with the current of life. We could become less stressed. We have less anxiety. We get less exhausted because we're not trying to swim upstream, right? If you've ever been in a strong current where you were trying to swim against it, it's very easy to get exhausted to the point where then you just start to drown, right? Same thing with life. If you're trying to swim against the current of your life and you don't understand what is being asked of you by these planets, it can be very exhausting. When you understand that there is a certain way to navigate these gracefully and there's doing things the hard way, that to me is the real benefit of this. And everyone's going to have a little bit of a different relationship with these planets in the sky. That's when we see the relationship between our birth chart, what maybe our soul intended to do, or what the universe intended for us to do, and then the tension of what is expected of the collective through the transits. Sometimes we go through periods in our life when we are in alignment with the aspects, when they work with the intention that we had planted as a seed in our chart. Sometimes we're at cross purposes with what is happening. But I do think there's a way to navigate it gracefully either way. Okay. Marietta says, yep, this is me. I'm well, and I hope all is well with you too. I'm glad to hear that. Marietta, it's nice to see your beautiful face here in the chat, and just wishing you all the best, friend. Devin, Selena's Gateway is here. Says, hey, Spencer, it's my solar return next Monday. Happy solar return, Devin. Happy early birthday, friend. Have you worked with a solar return that had a Mercury Cazimi? Potentially. Nothing is coming off the top of my head, but just knowing you and your chart, if you're comfortable with me sharing the house that it's in, I think that's I'll wait for your confirmation, but I'm just, for you personally, shared resources, like learning how to repair your relationship with giving and receiving, thinking about how to work with time when it comes to shared resources, working with the power of surrender, I think, is another thing too. We'll talk about the Litai today, and I think that might be something that might be really powerful for you, is how do we work with the things that we can control and the things that we can't, right? Yeah. Oh, okay. So Devin says Scorpio rising solar return as well. So that's a 7th house Mercury Cazimi, right? So we've got Devin is a Libra rising and has Scorpio rising as a solar return. So what we'll do in astrology is we'll overlap the solar return and the natal chart and see where the connections are. So there is going to be an overlap between 7th house partnerships and 8th house, the shared resources of those partnerships, right? So we have a lot of working with planting new seeds in how to relate with others in Devin's chart. So pay close attention, Devin, when we talk about the Litai. I think that there's some really good insights within that. I'm going to share slides from the Taurus Decans webinar there too as well. And the other way we can think about this too. So we have a Libra rising chart here just on the screen. So I'm just going to show you this real quick. So in Devin's chart here, he has a Mercury Cazimi, all right, in his 8th house natally, but in the 7th house of his solar return. And that Mercury is getting renewed, and it's renewing his 9th house of belief systems and his 12th house of secret undoings, secret enemies, solitude, things of that nature, right? So he might be needing to make a new start in how he relates to others and how he shares resources with others, and it might change his belief system about the world, ninth house, or how he presents in his spirituality, or how he aligns with either the orthodox spirituality or the unorthodox. And it may also have an important effect on the understanding the ways that he might self-sabotage, or that the ways that he may need more solitude than he's given himself in the past, something like that. So those are all things that are coming to mind off the top of my head, Devin. So I hope that's helpful for you. And we'll keep diving into it. But happy early birthday, friend. Happy belated birthday to Rachel. Happy early birthday to my friend Devin here. I love my Taurus friends. All right. No problem, friend. Okay. It's also interesting because I have a 7th house natal Mercury. Well, there you go. It's getting lit up. It's getting lit up, friend. And it's I think when we have Kazimis in our solar returns, there's just a lot of seeds being planted for a new way of being, right? For a new perspective. It can be really energizing. It can be, I think there's a lot of insights in how to repair trust. I would say that's something that's coming to mind with this is, I think that from what I've been told, Devin's been going through some changes in his relationships, and repairing the trust in those relationships and in being able to move forward with that, I think is probably spoken to towards that solar return. Devin says 12th is also the home where you're at college or the hotel when you travel. There you go. The derived house, like maybe the hostel on some level, right? Maybe the place you're staying when you're in a foreign place. So maybe you're doing some foreign traveling this year, potentially. All right. All right, Devin, hang in there, bud. And one day at a time. Building trust is something that takes experience. It takes some nurturing and care. A lot of self-care goes into that. And there's good people out there, Devin, and you're a good person, and I think you're worthy of love and respect and of commitment and all of those things. And I think you'll find it. You know, you'll find it. You keep giving those things to people out in the world, and it's going to come back to you, friend. Okay. So, interestingly enough, we're talking about Mercury Cazimi. And that was our next banner, our slide here, because we just are going to have experienced Mercury Cazimi on the 14th prior to the new moon, right? So a lot of the things I've been trying to help Devin with here today apply to us in the collective with Mercury Cazimi on the 14th, a renewal in the heart of the sun, in the 10-degree section associated with repairing something that has maybe fallen into corruption or fallen into disrepair on some level, right? Rachel says that's a great insight. Never thought about the 12th as the home when traveling or at college. That is good. The derived house method is really powerful. Derived houses means you treat the house that you're working with as the first house, and you overlay the different house meanings over top. So in this case, the 9th house becomes the first. The 9th is associated with higher education, foreign travel, belief systems. And then you'd make it the second from the 9th would be like the resources associated with that. The 3rd would be communications around that, or the local environment in the foreign place. Okay, the 4th house could be the home that you're staying in the foreign place. 5th house could be romances that you have while you're abroad, which could be spicy. So all these kind of things could be could be understood through derived houses. So Mercury Cazimi, building up to the new moon. Again, take a look at your Gemini and your Virgo areas of your life and see where you might be experiencing a renewal. The other thing I will say about that is that what the sun likes to do is it casts light on issues that we're trying to resolve with the planet that it is renewing. When we have a new moon, the sun is infusing light into a lunar body that is trying to bring celestial light to the physical plane. It is saying, here's my intention. Now go out and build something with it. That's what the sun is saying to the moon, all right? Manifest. When the sun is communicating with Mercury, it says, what questions do you need to ask to be able to either learn the right skills? Mercury is associated with skills, or communicate the right things that you need to communicate, or ask the right questions to be able to get the skills, to be able to find the answers. Mercury is a planet that casts doubt. It is something that says, have you questioned this part of it, right? Robert Schmidt, the luminary of Project Hindsight, talks about Mercury as a planet that casts doubt, that puts things into question. Mercury asks great questions. So when you have a Mercury Cazimi, you could get some insight and a spotlight on what questions you need to ask to be able to repair something that has maybe fallen into disrepair or corruption, quite possibly through no fault of your own. Remember when we talked about humility in the face of nature? These are the types of energies that are related to weeding the garden. Sometimes you can't anticipate every single problem because the seasons change. What was a pest or a problem a previous year could be a completely different issue the next year. Maybe you had a really rainy season the spring before and you had some mold that you had to take care of. But if you applied that same solution in a season that is characterized by drought, you wouldn't be solving the right problem. Do you see what I'm saying? This is something that I really am passionate about when it comes to utilizing the right solutions for the current, present issues that we're dealing with. As human beings, we get stuck in old narratives. We get stuck in old ways of solving problems that were in the past. If you continue to utilize old methods of dealing with new problems, you're dissipating your energy in a way that might not solve the problem at all. So how do we become present? How do we learn what are the actual issues that we're dealing with now versus the ones that we're trying to solve through old habits that may not even be applicable to the issue that we're experiencing? And that Mercury Cazimi can be the insight that says, oh, well, here's your problem, right? It's actually a drought. You need to water this plant. You don't need to spray an antifungal on it. Do you see what I'm saying? Those are the types of practical solutions when you're dealing with the problem that is presented to you. If we go back to Devin's experience with the solar return, there may be some old narrative that Devin was working with his 8th house of shared resources, where he may have been caught up in creating value through a partner for himself. Maybe he valued maybe he valued himself through the eyes of another. And this could be a powerful year for Devin, maybe striking out on their own, to value himself through his own eyes rather than the eyes of someone else. And that could be trying to deal with the right problem, right? Of saying, how can I find value in my own perspective rather than always trying to conform to someone else's perspective? Remember when I was talking about earlier about the chart that was given to us and the expectations of the planets in the sky? Think about, in this chart here is a Libra rising chart like we have with Devin. And look at the huge stack up in Aries in the 7th house. A Libra rising could potentially be interested in seeing someone else's perspective, in harmonizing with someone else, of being able to balance their own needs with someone else's needs. Those planets in the sky right now in Aries, though, are maybe encouraging us to take our own needs into account and to say, this is what I need in the relationship. And that is very foreign to someone who has really powerful Libra placements. So there could be a discomfort that comes at this period in Devin's life, or anybody who has strong Libran impulses. That to me is so valuable and important to realize, because oftentimes we can be really self-recriminating when we're like, well, my whole purpose is to be harmonious, but I feel really like angry. I feel really like selfish. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we could, instead of self-recriminating in those moments, if we had no knowledge of astrology, you could say, oh, well, this is the planetary influence that is coming through everyone right now. And how do I balance out my need to harmonize with the need to protect my own interests and my need to utilize anger and direct it towards something productive? I know a lot of Libra folks that are afraid to be angry, myself included. I have a part of spirit in Libra, and there's we were trained through trauma in a lot of ways to not express anger in certain households. If you grew up in a waspy white Anglo-Saxon Protestant household, expressing anger wasn't really smiled upon in a lot of situations. And we learn defense mechanisms not to do that. And as we grow up and as we come more into authenticity, and as we deal with issues in the collective that really kind of make a lot of people angry, including myself. I was so angry this morning, friends. I was so angry. I was angry for a number of reasons. I was angry because of the destruction of the Democratic Republic and free and fair elections. I was really, really angry and frustrated about events from the Supreme Court in the last week, and with events in Tennessee and Virginia, and the dismantling of fair districts for voting districts. If you're not familiar with that, the Supreme Court took away a lot of protections that helped protect people of color and their voting districts. And Tennessee right away said, we're going to completely redraw all the districts in Memphis, and we're going to literally split a stronghold for the Black community, in a voting stronghold, like the one district that was representative of Black voices in Tennessee. And we're going to split it into 3 districts, one of which extends 3 hours away from Memphis. Think about that for a second. That's so fucked up. But I was so angry about that this morning. And I was also angry about the destruction of the planet for the purposes of greed, and for the purposes of just this nihilistic kind of mindset when it comes to let's extract as so much profit and destroy all this beautiful planet. And that was juxtaposed by oh, well, that's David Attenborough's birthday. Look at this guy. Look what he's doing. And I was just getting enraged about it. And then my partner said, why don't we go outside? Why don't we go walk in the garden a little bit, pull some weeds, touch some grass, get some sun on your face. And it calmed me down. And it helped me become present in the moment on this planet. And in that moment, all of that didn't completely go away, but it helped me to focus on where I was in that moment versus the things I couldn't control in that moment. Doesn't mean that I don't put energy into trying to make changes in my world. But I think this is another Taurus realization, especially Taurus 3. Taurus 3 is, or Taurus in general, is attempting to make a union and a comfort with our bodies and with the external sensory experience. Yesterday, when I was in the movie theater, I was attempting to satisfy the senses with music, and there was a disconnect because of the malefic enclosure of Venus, because it was too loud. My body was uncomfortable. I was a little bit, still have some social anxiety about being in enclosed public spaces, and we are a COVID conscious household. And this is the disconnect between the body and the spirit. And one really smart way to deal with Taurus discontent, get back into your body, get back into the comfort regarding your body. In that moment, my partner was realizing that I was feeling discomfort in the body and between the body and the mind. And she helped me get grounded back into my body by putting me in a situation where my senses were filled with good things, filled with sunshine, filled with flowers, filled with trees growing, filled with beautiful little insects and butterflies flying around me. Do you see what I'm saying? That is such a simple solution for Taurus issues. Let's say we have a Taurus children. The solution for a Taurus child that is dysregulated is very simple. Have they had enough to eat? Have they had enough sleep? Have you hugged them 3 times that day? And is there anything in their environment that is completely disrupting their senses? Is it too loud? Is there a bad smell in the environment? Is there something itchy on their skin? Is there like a garment that they're wearing that doesn't work for them? Those are actually fairly simple solutions. You get some clothes that feel nice. You get something to eat. You go to sleep. You get a hug. Like, those are a lot easier things to, I think, help with than existential crises that other signs can have, right? Think about the next sign, Gemini, the existential crises of choice, right? Not as easy to solve, the dualities of that, rather than some of the challenges that we experience as Tauruses. Yeah, Rachel says, "Oh, Tanya, yeah," and it was good in the moment, right? It was powerful as a fellow Taurus moon native. We both share a Taurus moon. She realized in the moment that that was what I needed, and was able to help provide that. So, if you have people in your life, whether they have strong Taurus placements or whether they are experiencing some of the discomfort regarding Venus and malefic enclosure, or the sun and the moon on Algol, or in a difficult place of Taurus, I think the solution this go around is actually sensory. It is simple. It is, did you get enough sleep? Are you eating well? Did you get enough water? Are you hydrated? Are your clothes comfortable? Have you had enough physical touch? All of those things can help just like completely lower the volume on the discomfort that we might be experiencing. Okay, so let's dive into Taurus 3. First of all, let's take a little stretch break first. Do me a huge favor. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stretch your body. And when we're talking about getting into our bodies, when we do these sort of longer form videos, it's easy to get a little bit just so in our heads that we don't stretch out. And this is a reminder for myself. I've got a glass of water here. I've been sitting for a while, so I'm going to stretch a little bit. You can hear my joints popping. I'm going to move my hips. I'm going to shake my hips a little bit. I'm going to get my shoulders all worked out. There you go. I hope you're doing the same. It's good to move your body. It's good to circulate. That helps our brains work better, okay? But while we're doing that, do me a huge favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can purchase a super chat while I'm live today, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and become a patron of the channel. The easiest thing to do, though, is hit that like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, subscribe to the newsletter if you don't want to miss one of these live streams. I love connecting with you live here and just hearing your stories too, and being able to like a person like Devin sharing a detail about their chart helps us to ground the astrology that we're talking about in a very intellectual way, in a very personal way, right? I love doing that. I love being able to say, let's take it out of just the abstract realm and make it practical and make it something useful. And we do that through sharing our stories. Okay, so let's go back to it. I think our back's stretched out. I got Radagast here next to me. You can't really see him on camera, but he's taking a nap in his box. Here he is. I don't want to disturb him too much, but this is the little box he sleeps in the chair. He's like, what's going on here? Do you have anything to say? Nothing to say. He's being a really good boy. Sometimes he gets a little mischievous, but today he just wants to be right next to me here. So let's talk about the sun and the moon in Taurus 3. We've been talking about it, but let's do it a little bit more intentionally here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this. Here's the deck and flash card associated with Taurus 3. You can see here the 7 of Pentacles, and we have some challenging stuff in Taurus 3. It is probably the most difficult to navigate of the Taurus decans. Now, your mileage may vary with that. Some may be like, well, the first decan is really tough. That's when we're worrying about resources. The second decan is more about the balance of work and play, of giving and receiving. And then when we get to the third decan, sometimes there's excesses. This is a Saturn-ruled decan in a Venus-ruled sign. It requires patience. Sometimes it requires hard, dirty work to weed the garden out and to get rid of the decay. Sometimes we have to get rid of the diseased part of the plant so that the healthy part can live. We have to evaluate the types of things that we have already done moving forward. Okay. There you go. Rachel says, wizard kitty, right? I love when the kitties make an appearance, right? Yeah, I've got 2 wizard cats, Gandalf and Radagast. They're big, Maine Coon mixes. They're long-haired, blue tuxedo type cats. They were shelter rescues. Just great babies and really good companions. They're gonna be they're they're gonna be 10 pretty soon. Like I think yeah, they're gonna be 10 next year. So getting into their senior years, but hopefully they live at least 10 more. Okay, so Taurus 3, Lord of Failure is what it's called in the book T. Lord of Success Unfulfilled in the book of Thoth. A lot of this is related to frustration of having to go through process, right? Austin Coppock calls it a string of prayer beads, and a lot of that is a reference to the spirit or the daimon in this decan called the litai. Now, I will show you a little thing about the litai here. But first, let's bring up here as a little bit of a, you can't really read the writing on here, but I will, I'll make this bigger for you so you can see this quick here. Let me see if I can make this. There we go. Okay, so this is the decan flashcard from Taurus 3. And themes in this, this is actually from my webinar. So if you want to learn more about this and you like these slides and you like this style, I have slides for every single decan, all 36 decans in my 12-part series, the decan webinars that are on my website for purchase. The themes in this decan: floods, droughts, pestilence, natural disasters, humility before nature, things that are out of our control, things that are bigger than us, assessing efforts, remediating mistakes. We can say, well, how has the process been playing out? We planted some seeds, we've cultivated the land, we've watered. Now is it fruiting the way that we expected? Like here's another example of this. We've been planting new trees in our yard, and we did so while the trees hadn't quite leafed out yet. So there was places that looked sunny that now are like cast into shade. And if we don't do something about the shade, those plants might not work out as well as we hope. So a remediation for an issue that had come up, and we knew that this was the case. You just have to do something about it, right? We really have to get out and trim those trees back so we can get more sunlight in the places that we want more sun. That's a remediation for something that is somewhat out of your control. Now, you could make an argument that they're like, and here's just an example, and I want you to make this, apply this to your own life. You could make the argument that you said, well, Spencer, you should have known in advance that there wasn't enough sunlight there. Maybe it was a little rash of you to plant that in that spot. And you might be right. But we also have other things in our life where we just have to get something in the ground and we can't overthink it. We have to just start the process. And we may be a little bit overly enthusiastic about it. And then when we come back and evaluate whether it's going to work out long term, that's when we have to make the changes and the shifts and improve the environment, I guess you could say, for success. So that might be something that you're experiencing in your life. Maybe it's not a tree that you planted in a shady spot that needs more sun. Maybe it's something that you did quickly in your life that you didn't really think about all the ramifications of it, and you need to go back and reevaluate it. Part of this comes through the story of Ate, A-T-E, which is like a demon that would step on the heads of mortals to get where they want. It was also associated with rashness, doing something too quickly. And the litai would come and offer up repentant prayers after Ate had stepped on the heads of mortals, right? So atonement is another thing where we're trying to solve something. We're trying to not only endure something that is maybe painful, but we're trying to atone for it and surrender to the higher power. That's where we get the string of prayer beads that comes in, surrendering to some forces that are more powerful than ourselves. Often those are natural forces. It also speaks to having faith in the process. Like when you're at the beginning of planting a garden, it can be very easy to overplant it because you're like, well, I see that there's space and I want to fill that space with life. And what you realize when you get further along in the process of life and in the process of being a gardener and the gardener of our lives is that you have to leave space for the thing that you planted to grow into maturity. And you will often have a much healthier tree or tomato plant if you had left space and not overplanted that space or your life with projects, time, etc. This is really a lesson in staying below your complexity ceiling. This says, I need to do this one project really well. I need to make space in my life rather than overcommitting myself. And you learn that as you go along. And you'll have something that is much more fully realized than if you split your attention in 1,000 different directions or you plant like a million different. When I first started doing tomatoes back in my 20s, I probably had like a 4x8 raised bed, which is not that big. And there was probably like 12 tomato plants in it. And that's really only space for about 4. You know, you could maybe put a few more in there, but a 4x8, you get 4 tomato plants that grow into full fruition rather than 12 that may not give you the type of harvest that you're looking for. So this is something to consider in your own life, is how do we do the most important things really well and leave space for that and create space for it rather than overplanting our lives. So questions to ask yourself: what results and consequences have your efforts produced? It's an evaluation phase, right? Saturn is a planet of consequences. Like, some consequences can be positive, some consequences can be negative. It just depends on what our process was up to that point. How much work is left and how much further do we have to go? You can see someone in the Seven of Pentacles, excuse me, leaning on his gardening hoe and saying, hey, I've got a lot more work to go before I have a good harvest, a healthy harvest. Susie Chang in her book 36 Secrets talks about watching her father shovel the driveway and leaning on the shovel, like evaluating how far he had to go halfway through, right? As an association with this card and with this decking. Asking ourselves, what went wrong? Did you learn from your mistakes? This is an important one. There is some magic in this decking about learning from our mistakes and healing from those mistakes. When we have a Kazemi or a new moon, we may get some real insight into what went wrong. And that will allow us to go through the process of making it right. So when we're planting a seed in Taurus 3, we're getting an awareness of something that may have gone wrong, and then starting the process of repairing it. I often tell the story here, when Jupiter was conjunct Uranus in this decan, I discovered just randomly, like Uranian, like a solution to a digestive issue I'd been having for most of my life. And it completely healed it. Like, I found an enzyme, it's called FODzyme, where I was able to digest a sugar called fructan that you often will see in onions and garlic and certain types of fruits and vegetables. And I was having a lot of pain associated with that. It was really, really bothering me. And my partner came across an article that said, maybe this is your problem. I thought it was a gluten sensitivity. It wasn't. It was fructan. And I found a solution to it. I was able to remediate that by changing my diet slightly and by finding a product that worked for me, right? So there might be something like that in your life. It doesn't have to be a physical issue, but oftentimes it is a physical issue with Taurus. Did you rush something? So we've talked about examples of maybe trying to overplant a garden, of saying, I can't really think it through that much. I just have to get this in the ground so it doesn't die. We did this last year when we had a bunch of blueberry bushes that needed to go in the ground so that they wouldn't freeze in their pots, and we just stuck them there. We didn't really have time to create the resources at the time to make the cages around them, and through that rashness, it left those blueberry bushes susceptible to damage from rabbits. So we have a couple of them that got really hammered by the rabbits. And so we'll have to go through and repair those. If there's any that didn't make it, we'll have to replace them. That's a Taurus 3 type of thing. But it was through trying to like rush a process. And sometimes we rush through necessity. Other times we do it just because we don't know any better, right? Can it be redone correctly, right? How do you protect what you've cultivated from blight? In the Seven of Pentacles, we see a figure evaluating, I would say, maybe a potato plant. This is related to the potato famines of Ireland that Pamela Coleman Smith had probably lived through or had at least been aware of in the 1840s when she was creating this deck in the early 19th century. So how do we deal with blight? How do we protect the things so that they don't fall into disrepair? And then finally, where do we need to surrender to a higher power? That to me is the real key to this decade. Sometimes the solution doesn't come from forcing a solution. Sometimes the solution just comes to you. Think about the energy of Venus in Taurus, right? This is the energy of a yin benefic, the yin phase of a benefic planet that is receiving good fortune. Sometimes the solutions need to just find us. It's not through forcing a solution, it's through becoming open and receptive to the solutions. And often that can be described as surrendering to a higher power. So these are also things to think about with Taurus 3. So here we have the litai, and you can see the litai are the personification of prayer. Theoi.com, a really great resource for this, says the litai were the personified spirits or daimons of prayer, ministers of the god Zeus. They were described as hobbling old women. Their opposite number was 8, the spirit of delusion and folly in those whose wake they followed. A personification of prayer offered up in repentance. They are described as the daughters of Zeus and as following closely behind crime and endeavoring to make amends for what has been done. But whoever disdains to receive them has himself to atone for the crime that has been committed. So that's where we become open and receptive, right? We're becoming receptive to being healed. These people in this decan, these daimons in this decan, they're healers, right? They want to heal something that has fallen into disrepair. Oftentimes we have to allow ourselves to be healed, right? That's where part of the surrender comes in as well. Sometimes we just get so attached to the corruption and the disrepair and the suffering that we experience that we don't allow ourselves to be helped or healed. And this is where the humility part of this comes in. Sometimes we have to be humble enough to say, you know what, I can't do this by myself. I need help. I need to be healed. I don't want to suffer anymore. I want to be a beacon of light for the world. I don't want to be a burden on it or someone who's spreading discontent and suffering to others. It doesn't mean that if we're suffering that we're necessarily a burden to others. It does mean, though, that I think that when we allow others to help us, we become part of the cycle of reciprocation rather than isolating ourselves from others. I think that's really the key when it comes to that. When we talk a little bit about the Algol aspect, we also have a fixed star here called Capulus, which is about 24 degrees. This is the sword of Perseus, which is talking and speaking towards 8, that reckless, rash action, ruthless passion, the phallic yang energy, testosterone, brute force. That's the part of this that gets us into trouble. And then we have the Algol that is here in the blinking eye of Medusa in the constellation of Perseus. It's an eclipsing binary star. So this is what any eclipses in ancient civilizations were not great omens. So if you saw something blinking in and out of existence, they were like, that's probably one to watch out for. In Chinese astrology, they called it piled up corpses because of its challenging energy. There was a lot of negative energy around it in ancient civilizations. But there is positive associations with feminine kundalini energy, with intensity, passion. But also we have to watch out for decapitation, losing one's head. This is why I think it's important to direct this energy in service of others and protection of others. I was asking my partner about this morning. I'm like, how would you experience positive Algol energy? How would you characterize utilizing this positively? And her first answer was punching up, right? Not necessarily utilizing that energy to look down on people that are weaker than us, right? To demonize or victimize people that are already suffering. Punching up means, like, when we're being critical, instead of being critical of our neighbor, how do we be critical of the system that created the suffering? How do we be critical of the people in power who are abusing power, right? And how do we find protection from that trauma? And how do we protect others? If we turn this energy on ourselves, if we try to hold on to it without utilizing it in service, that's when we experience the losing the head of Medusa, right? When we experience the challenge of just losing our minds, I guess, on some level, where it's not able to be restrained anymore. And I'm going to read to you from this. So this is the Algol part of this. This is from the Eternal Drama. It talks about the mirror of Perseus. This is Edward F. Edinger, or Edinger. I'm not sure exact the pronunciation. This is on page 84. And he's talking about the reflecting shield of Athena, a gift from the goddess of wisdom to be able to face the Gorgon Medusa. This is a gift to Perseus. The reflecting shield of Athena is of particular importance because without that device, Medusa could never have been faced and transformed. Given to the hero by the goddess, the embodiment of wisdom herself, Athena's mirror shield is the image of the civilizing process, how it takes place and how human consciousness is able to overcome the primordial horror represented by Medusa. Now, I want to stop here because we often see Medusa as this unrestrained force of nature, this hideous beast. Part of the other part of Medusa's story is that she was a beautiful maiden, like that was abused, was essayed and assaulted in one of the temples to the goddess, right? Like I believe by a version of Poseidon. So she herself was potentially victimized by yang forces. And there's other parts of the story that talk about Athena or another goddess giving these powers to be able to turn men to stone with snakes for hair to protect her against abuse. So I wanted to point that out so that we give a balanced perspective on this. The myth tells us that it takes a mirror to overcome or to deal with the elemental terror of what exists in the unconscious. The primary feature of the mirror is its ability to produce images. It shows us what we can otherwise not see for ourselves because we are too close to it. Without a mirror, for instance, we would never even know what our face looks like. Since we are inside looking out, there can be no self-knowledge, even the elementary self-knowledge of what we look like, unless there is some device that can turn the light back on us, unless there can be a reflexive moment. The whole process of consciousness, in both the individual and the collective sense, is served by an instrument that produces reflections, images giving us an objective sense of what we are. Athena's mirror, we should remember, is showing us an image of something we dare not look at directly. To grasp what we are dealing with, we need an image of it. We need to see it indirectly, which allows a more objective view. Surely it is not an accident that the term reflection refers to a specific capacity of human consciousness, the capacity to consider itself. That is the function of the mirror, and it is also the capacity of human consciousness to turn back on itself in self-critical, self-observing, self-scrutinizing reflection. So to me, this is like, if we have a problem that is this unrestrained power that we might not be able to deal with directly, how do we get a little bit of objectivity? How do we not necessarily deal with it directly? How do we deal with it a little, maybe once removed, so that we don't become overpowered by that force? I think that's something to think about with the solution to some of the challenges that Algol can present to us. Now, I need to take one moment and let my beautiful kitty out because he's scratching at the door, so I'll be right back, friends. And we're back. That's nature calling, right? Like probably nature calling for him. And to prevent an accident or anything like that, we take preventative measures, which could be a Taurus III type of experience, right? Okay. Now let's move forward from Taurus III and talk about Venus and Gemini 3. And here we see Venus. Oh, let's remove that. Put this up here and we'll go. There's a deck and flash card, Venus and Gemini 3. Now, Gemini 3 is the ending of an intellectual process. Taurus 3 is the middle of a physical process, okay? The middle. We start our elemental journey in the tarot and potentially in the zodiac with the cardinal signs. We move to the fixed energy. So we have cardinal Earth, Capricorn, fixed Earth, Taurus, mutable Earth, Virgo. Virgo being the end, the refinement of the material. When we have the intellectual process, we have Libra, the cardinal sign. We have Aquarius, the fixed sign. And here we have Gemini, the mutable sign. Is the end of an intellectual process. Now, the tarot doesn't look too kindly on the images associated with the element of air. The swords are fairly difficult images, as you can see here. This poor person with 10 swords in their back. I mean, here we started off the Gemini process feeling blindfolded, bound by maybe too many options, the Jupiterian expansion of options and questions to the point where we just feel paralyzed. The Mars decan in Gemini shows us this 9 of Swords, where we have someone who is having a lot of difficulty reconciling opposites. And then finally, we get to the solar ruled decan of Gemini 3, where we see things in high contrast. You know, the height, we're seeing the height of the sun, where it casts a lot of shadows. We're attempting to integrate our shadow, our ego, all of those things. And here those contrasts become really stark. And we're faced with so many choices that we have to sort of let go of some of the choices to be able to infuse the idea that we are thinking about into a body when we get it next into the first decan of Cancer. When we go from a Mercury sign to a lunar sign, we have that idea, we have that communication, we have that question, and now we're trying to make it real in Cancer. We're trying to nurture it. To do so, you may have to let go of the ambiguity. This decan attempts to do so. It attempts to eliminate ambiguity by saying this and not that, all or nothing. We have to be careful though, because as I was referring to earlier, the sun changes direction at the end of this decan. You may feel so fixated on one option over the other that when you actually get to the moment of taking action on it, you realize that, oh my God, I've got to change my mind. I didn't evaluate that 100% correctly. I tried to kill the wrong twin on some level. I think that, to me, as a Cancer sun, Mercury, but a Venus Gemini, I think that the answer is not necessarily trying to kill one part of ourselves or to eliminate one of those twins. I think that if we think about this from an integrated way, is to try to unify both the light and the dark, is to try to integrate the shadow that we project onto someone else and own it, right? So this is the energy that is feeding into this new moon. How do we resist the demonization of the other, which is something that happens often in this decan? So often we demonize an other. And maybe it's something that we don't like about ourselves, and we project that onto someone else and make them the enemy. We also, you see people do this with projecting the good parts of themselves onto others. They say, well, this person is perfect and I'm a piece of shit. And you're projecting the good parts of yourself onto someone else as well. So I think instead of trying to eliminate options, murder the other twin, project the shadow onto something or someone else, how do we just integrate it and love both of those parts of ourselves? Love the light and the dark. This is why I am loath to cancel someone like Michael Jackson, for example, or anybody that is a complex human being. Michael Jackson experienced an enormous amount of suffering when he was coming up in the world. That suffering also led to a skill set that was somewhat otherworldly. Like that skill set potentially led to many people experiencing joy. That process that brought him to that skill set created a lot of suffering for him and potentially for some other people. it's kind of the Taoist story of the horse, that where a person finds a horse out in the world, and the villagers are like, "That's incredible, that's amazing," and the guy's like, "I don't know, it could be, it could, or it could not be," and then the horse kicks him, and he breaks his leg, and the villagers are like, "That's terrible," and they're like, "Yeah, he has the same ambivalent response." And then because he has a broken leg, after the war, a war breaks out, and he doesn't have to go to war. He's like, "That's great fortune." Or, and then it keeps going like this. The horse runs away. People are like, "That's terrible." And then the horse comes back with a herd of horses. Great fortune. And then he has to figure out how to feed all the horses. And it and on into perpetual eternity. So being able to hold the ambiguity. I have also have a friend loves Michael Jackson. This was like his ultimate inspiration. He's of the age where he was just the perfect age to not be as conscious when the controversial things were coming up. I kind of came into alignment with the Michael Jackson story when he was starting his descent, right? Like in the early 90s. That's why I became more conscious of him. But I had already absorbed a lot of the good parts of it as a young person. And he categorically refuses to acknowledge the potential that this person did anything wrong or evil. And I'm just not, that's not where I'm at with it. I can acknowledge the grace and the genius and the joy that he brought to people, while also holding space for the possibility that he did great, horrific things in darkness on this planet as well. And being able to hold that space and see people as human, I think, is really important. That's the integrating of both of those things. When you have a mutable sign like this, like the dichotomy that comes through like Gemini or Virgo in Michael Jackson's case, you have the virgin, the pure expression where the people are projecting this purity onto this person. And then sometimes you have like the harlot, which is, there is a dark side to that. There is this like earthy sensuality to it that often goes unacknowledged in Virgo. And I think part of the journey of Gemini is integrating that, rather than having to make a judgment one way or the other, like the executioner's sword as it is described. It is the transition towards integration of those things, of holding space for both the light and the dark, and not necessarily with judgment. And that doesn't mean that if there are abuses happening that we let it go, that we let it continue to happen, or that we justify them, or that we promote them. I think it's more about seeing the humanity and the process and the cyclical way that one event can lead to another event, and that not necessarily pulling, I don't know. I just have a lot of trouble with complex individuals where we can't acknowledge the positive that they put out on the earth if they've also done horrible things on the earth. I just don't think that that's the nature of reality. And I know that that's going to be controversial for folks, because in no way, shape, or form am I endorsing the horrific things that were accused of this person, or that have been accused of other important figures out in the world. I think it's really important to acknowledge the suffering that has come through events like that or actions like that, and to provide the repercussions necessary to stop that from happening. But there is also a part of me that just sees the ambiguity in the human experience. And I think that's part of the Gemini experience, is integration of both parts of ourselves in that regard. So I don't know if I'm verbalizing that effectively, but it is a hard thing to do. Rachel says, as a child of the 80s, I feel this, to hold people accountable for their wrongs, but leaving room in the narrative for change and the trauma they experience themselves. Well said, Rachel. Absolutely well said. Because it is very difficult to see like a figure like Michael Jackson as anything other than a victim himself of abuse, right? And often the sad truth is that people who were abused often do become abusive, because that is what they have learned how to deal with trauma. And that type of abuse can really distort your reality. And I have this conversation with my partner all the time. Was the suffering that a person like Michael Jackson experienced, was it worth the joy that he brought to the world too? Because for those of you who didn't grow up in that period, he was ubiquitous. It was a phenomenon like I don't know if we've seen anything like it since. I really don't. Like, because we had monoculture, because we didn't have the splitting of attention that the internet has happened. Like, you heard that on the radio all the time. And there are two artists in my youth where if their music came on, people started dancing. People's auras lit up. It was Michael Jackson and it was Stevie Wonder. And the two of those folks have just such um, an essence about them that transcends so many different differences between people, age, demographic, etc. And I just think that there's something really admirable about that artistry. Now, we can have longer philosophical debates about separating the art from the artist. And I don't know if I have a great answer for you. But if you are a child of a certain age, like Rachel and I, you knew that person was mythical in nature. Just this. And I'm a person that likes to take people down off their pedestals eventually. But man, I've gone really on a journey with that person because they just are so, the energy that they brought to their performance was so intense. I mean, just the combination of the singing, the dancing, the aura, it's something. And again, I don't know if we'll see anything like that again in our lifetimes. Okay, so that's Venus and Gemini 3, the difficulty holding contradictions, the need to reintegrate the shadow parts of ourselves and also the positive parts of ourselves that we might project onto someone or something else. The difficulty of this being both a malefic enclosure and out of bounds. So we may really feel strongly that we have to externalize some evil, that we have to make a choice and reject some part of ourselves that we see carried out in the collective. We may be attracted to something very different. We may want to, we may feel a lot of pressure towards individuation that makes these holding of ambiguous spaces very difficult. All of those things are affecting this new moon. Okay, so let's finish up with just taking you through how the astrology, is going to unfold for the next few weeks until we get to the full moon, the second full moon. Okay, so this is about 2 weeks that we'll take you through. And I'm going to take this down and we'll put the chart back up. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take you through. I'm going to put the new moon is going to stay static on the inside ring. And the way that the astrology is going to unfold is going to be on the outer ring. So let's go to the 16th. And what we're going to do is we'll just start the day before, right? Where you see here on the 2 days before, here's the Mercury Cazimi. So the Mercury Cazimi is kicking off this new moon. So the way that I see that playing out, the Mercury Cazimi shows you the problem that you might be dealing with and gives you some insight and some ways to ask the right questions about what needs to be fixed, right? What do we need to repair? And then the new moon is planting the seed to actually do the repairs. So if we move forward to the 18th, okay, that's when we have a really big shift in our planetary energy. So if we move just forward a day, this happens technically on the 18th, but here it is on the 19th. Mars moves into Taurus and Venus moves into Cancer. A big shift from Mars and Aries and Venus and Gemini. Now, the challenge with this is that Venus is still in malefic enclosure because Mars has changed signs. Now Mars is casting its ray on one side of a newly ingressed Venus into Cancer, and Saturn is now making a square to Venus on the other side. See that? To me, that is a out of the frying pan into the fire. It is shifting the area of life that we feel stuck in, right? Like, let's say we have difficulty integrating our shadow, holding ambiguities. And we are doing so because we are trying to convince someone to our own perspective. We're trying to win over the hostile crowd. We're trying to state our own values with Saturn in Aries too. And then it shifts and we realize that, man, we have to integrate these things. We have to harmonize. The Two of Cups is associated with Venus in the first decan of Cancer. We're trying to harmonize with another individual. And Mars moves into the decan associated with worry about physical resources. So the problem shifts from holding ambiguities, integrating shadow energy, to worry over financial resources and relationships. Saturn making a square to the Venus and the family area in Cancer. So Saturn saying, well, your individual needs are putting some pressure on the needs of the group and the collective, and feeling stuck within that. The difficulty harmonizing with our personal, romantic, business partners because of a fear of scarcity, because of needing to strike out on our own and state our own values, but maybe having difficulty, I don't know, monetizing that, I guess you could say. And I don't know. I'm just really over the whole, like, I've got to monetize every single thing I do. I never really vibrated with it as a musician. I loved music. I loved musicians, music. I loved the feeling that I got with music. I absolutely loathed and despised the music business. And I feel a little bit similar with astrology. I love astrology. I love helping people. I don't love trying to please the algorithm with like certain forms of content, of like advertising. I don't like any of that. I don't like the competition between astrologers as well, like that are trying to outdo one another with their discoveries or become the sole I don't know, voice for something. And I've met a lot of great people in this industry that aren't like that, but I've run into some that are, and it's disillusioning. And the truth of the matter is you find good and difficult people, functional and difficult people. Let's start moving away from good and bad. You find functional and dysfunctional people. You find healthy and you find toxic people in every single business, area of life, industry, etc. And sometimes it's even more insidious when we are in a spiritual business, I guess, or a spiritual thing, because we entered into that space trying to find people that were evolved, I guess you could say. And then when we get disillusioned that they're just people, just like everyone else, then it can be equally as frustrating. So my point with all that is saying that one-on-one relationships can be pressured by the need to make a living, with the fear of scarcity, coming to an agreement, finding mutually harmonious and beneficial relationships can be difficult when Mars moves into Taurus and Venus moves into Cancer. The other thing that's really just happening with this is we're starting to see the Mars-Pluto square perfecting, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the first aspect of the moon after it escapes from the bond is a conjunction with Venus. This is on the 18th as well. So you could see it's already past Venus, but I do think that there will be discussions, right, with our partners in life and business, etc., about how to create mutually beneficial relationships. But there will be stress because of Mars in its exile, Saturn in its fall, putting a lot of pressure on that Venus. So coming into alignment with the intimate relationships in our life could be stressful around this. It's just a different energy of the malefic enclosure. And we may be, with Venus still out of bounds, we could be trying new things in our relationships too. We could be trying on new roles. We could be trying on new ways of coming into alignment and harmony that are outside the norm. So keep your eyes peeled for that as well. Venus will sextile Mars on the 19th. So here's Venus making the sextile to Mars at about 0 degrees here. It's still a malefic enclosure, right? That's the entrance back into it, I guess you could say. I guess maybe we get a tiny reprieve from it on the 18th, but it enters right back into it on the 19th. Mercury is going to be at the north bending of the nodes on the 19th. So here's Mercury at about 4 degrees of Gemini, squaring the nodes of the moon. We've discussed this a little bit today already, so I won't belabor it. I went into it in more depth in not only the beginning of this broadcast, but in the Astrology of May. But generally, our options are at a peak, right? We are at the peak of increase, the peak of like so many different directions we could go. And now we're trying to integrate the information that we've collected so that we can make choices, so that we can move towards taking action and embodying the ideas that we are trying to explore. That's the movement from Gemini to Virgo, like saying, how would we take this out of just the idea phase and make it real? And Virgo tends to pare things down, right? Not only is Virgo the south node, but Virgo itself is sort of kind of like some south node energy. I don't know if that's a really great one-to-one comparison, but it is sort of reducing our options in a sign that is already trying to weed out the garden of inefficiencies. So we could be trying to release some of the things that we're going towards with Mercury making the square to the nodes, moving towards the south node. Sun moves into Gemini on the 20th. Okay, so then instead of the sun being hosted by the malefically enclosed out-of-bound Venus, now it's being hosted by a very strong Mercury in its own sign of Gemini. So that could actually lead to some movement around the 20th and the 21st. But no rest for the weary. Mercury moves out of bounds on the 22nd. So now we've got the sun hosted not only by a Venus out of bounds, but now it's going to be hosted by Mercury out of bounds. So our ability to be flexible, our ability to explore a lot of the questions that come up could be unique, so to speak. That 22nd day has a lot going on. The Venus is going to square Neptune at about 3 degrees of Cancer and Aries. So we may be trying to make some sense of our relationships, but it could be really murky, I guess you could say. There is one point of insight, though, that day where Uranus is going to conjoin the sun at 1 degree of Gemini in the Uranus cazimi. Now, I know this is somewhat of a controversial use of technique because we're using a modern planet with a traditional technique, but I think it's worth at least paying attention to as what types of downloads are we going to get where the sun might be infusing energy and light and awareness into, the journey of Uranus through Gemini. So just pay attention to things like that are coming out of that Uranus cazimi. We may have to innovate around that period of time. I think that Uranus cazimi almost feels like a Mercury out of bounds kind of correlation. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll look at the traditional technique that is sort of speaking to a similar type of experience as a modern one. And that one feels somewhat similar to me where we have this flash of insight that is outside the norm that we need to explore a little bit more. Now, the first quarter moon is happening on the 23rd. So here is the sun at 2 degrees of Gemini, squaring the moon at about 2 degrees of Virgo, Of course, it's a little bit past here, but that first quarter moon is going to be conjoining the south node. So normally, when we have a first quarter moon, we have some tension between the intentions of the sun and the embodiment of the moon. What I've learned from, or inferred, I guess you could say, from studying the way that an artist like Austin Coppock utilizes lunar phases with his decans in his book is I generally think increasing the qualities during a waxing moon phase that the moon is in and decreasing those qualities when the moon is waning for the specific purpose of achieving the solar directive. So in this case, the solar directive in Gemini 1 is taking in of new information. To be able to see our possibilities, to be able to collect the pollen of our lives, to be able to understand all of our options with the sun in Gemini. When the moon gets into Virgo, we need to kind of pare it down a little bit. We've been taking in, the moon squares in Virgo. Now we have to integrate. We've breathing in all of the information. Now we have to exhale all the things that aren't relevant, I guess you could say. Now, when the moon's conjoining the south node, that is a point of release, right? So we may have to let go of process, of attachment to process. This decan of Virgo is actually, we were talking about Michael Jackson as a theme today. He had Pluto and the sun in the first decan of Virgo, right? Really close together in about 4 and 6 degrees of Virgo, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around those areas. He was very process driven. He was the result of an extraordinary amount of discipline, but also practice, right? And he was very attached to doing things a certain way. And maybe what we need to do is release our attachment to doing things a certain way so that we can be free to explore at this first quarter moon, with the moon conjoining the south node. If we're so attached to the process that we've chosen to weed out information, we may miss something. We may miss something important. And with Mercury out of bounds, we may dismiss an out-of-the-box solution that is staring us right in the face because we're like, I would normally just weed that out. I wouldn't even consider that, right? So to me, this first quarter moon is the issue where we have to be careful of overly weeding information that comes to us that may not be familiar, right? So being open to solutions that aren't necessarily what we would normally utilize as a solution. That to me feels right for this particular first quarter moon. Once we hit that first quarter moon, then we have the sun moving into the bending of the nodes on the 25th. So then there's the sun at 4 degrees of Gemini, squaring the 4-degree Pisces north node and the 4-degree Virgo south node. Another turning point. These squaring of the nodes are turning points. Maybe when we get the information around the first quarter, we're reluctant to weed out the information that we normally would get rid of. Maybe that leads to a changing in a sense of purpose, a changing in a sense of identity, a changing in the sense of what is animating and bringing us vitality. So this is something where we might be moving away from escaping from our reality, the north node in the first decan of Pisces, of leaving behind material manifestation, and maybe starting to move towards a shifting of process, of re-engaging in physical reality. A lot of us probably have wanted to turn the noise down on physical reality lately. When physical reality feels, for many of us, myself included, just overwhelming with corruption, with destruction, with greed, with abuse, it's very easy to want to go off into our own worlds and headspace. And in some regards, it can be balancing and healthy to do so. If we overdo that, it can be unhealthy. We have to figure out the balance between how do we stay present even when things don't look or feel or are manifesting the way that we want, and just checking out completely and going off into a fantasy world while the world burns. That's equally as destructive. So this might be a turning point where we've had the rest we need going off into our imagination, and now we're going to take that dream vision and we're going to do something with it. We're going to come back down to earth. Maybe we don't have to put 2 feet back down on the earth. Maybe it's just 1 foot. We still have 1 foot in the sky reaching towards the ideal, and we have the other foot grounding those ideals down into the earth. Think of this like a nuthatch who crawls down the trunk of a tree. He's taking ideals from spirit and grounding them into physical and practical reality. And I think this could be a powerful moment for that with the sun at the north bending of the nodes. Now that is building towards one of the more difficult experiences of the month, Mars squared Pluto. So here is Mars at 5 degrees of Taurus, squaring Pluto at 5 degrees of Aquarius. Okay. Pretty challenging. Now the sun is trining Pluto. So that is at least trying to attempt to give us options. Mars square Pluto, first decan of Taurus, first decan of Aquarius. Remember, Mars is a planet that severs and separates. It brings conflict. It wants to utilize the resources of the place that it is in to create the assertion of will, to sever and separate, to disrupt. And when it's in Taurus, that disruption could be coming through resources, physical resources, physical security, our relationships to our bodies, our peace, our inner peace with our bodies. A lot of, like, this could be a feeling of body dysphoria on some level, where there's all sorts of different ways we can have dysphoria with our body, where we don't just feel comfortable in our own skin, right? Some of it could be that we don't feel comfortable being embodied on this planet, right? This is when we see some of the horrible abuses in the way that society is going, there may be some real discomfort with continuing on. And I want to say, like, this too shall pass. If you are in that space, that is a temporary experience with the square with Mars and Pluto. And if we're able to kind of maybe turn down the volume and the noise on that and find ways to become embodied during that period of time, that can help alleviate some of that suffering, hopefully. And reach out. If you're having those types of feelings of not wanting to be embodied anymore, I'd be happy to spend some time with you, whatever that means, just, and reach out to the people in your life. I think that's important to put that out there. Okay. On a collective level, a lot of fear around scarcity, a lot of fear of surveillance state, I guess, with the Pluto and Aquarius, a lot of fear of the other or something that is exiled, fear of exiles creating fear of scarcity. We see this with some of the challenges that we're demonizing with people who are immigrating to other countries or exiles in other countries. This could be the volume turned up on that rhetoric, I guess you could say. Again, it's a projection. It's a projection from the oligarch class onto the most vulnerable. While the oligarch class is extracting enormous amounts of wealth, they have to create a scapegoat for that. And the scapegoats that they've created in places like America are immigrants. So that noise and volume could get turned up on that. And first of all, it's wrong, and it's a distraction from the extraction of the wealth class. So keep that in mind if you are susceptible to that type of propaganda, that let's punch up rather than punching down. I think that's really important as we move through these challenges as well. I think that the other thing about the Mars-Pluto square, we are experiencing a war that we started and have created our own problems. And the delayed effect of the economic impact of it will probably be starting to wash ashore towards the end of May, if it hasn't already. It probably has already, but it's probably going to get a little bit more loud. My personal opinion on this is my personal opinion, but my personal opinion is Americans are extremely entitled in every sense of the word. The fact that people are upset that their gas is $5 instead of $3 is the embodiment of entitlement. Like, that type of gas price is rare in the world. Now, that doesn't mean that doesn't make our daily lives difficult. It just means that let's get outside of our own egocentric way of viewing the world and see that the suffering that is created in other countries through the attachment to convenience. Now, getting that off my chest, if you are living in a Western country and you're struggling to survive because we've done away with all of the social safety nets and the ability to help each other in ways that aren't pushed back upon by bureaucratic forces, things could get a little dicey, because it's not just the gasoline that gets expensive. It's the supply routes that supply our food, that supply all of the things that we're trying to get connected with. So I think on some level, the fear could be realistic. I think that one of the things that is a balm or a solution for feeling fear of scarcity, especially when it comes from Taurus 1. That is a decan about preparation. It's a decan where we take those feelings of fear of scarcity and we start to clear the fields. I know it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. When we fear scarcity during times of conflict worldwide, instead of relying on the systems that we are dependent on to like provide food or resources, oftentimes in the past, people have started taking back some of their own agency and started growing their own food, started tightening the belt a little bit and reusing resources. Maybe they find alternatives to the things that they would normally have available. For example, when we had experiences in some of the mid 20th century with worldwide conflicts, I believe that the silver started to be very valuable for making weapons, I guess, or something like that. And they stopped making, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe it was copper that became valuable. Neither here nor there. One of those metals became useful and difficult to obtain, and they had to switch gears. They had to use something that was different. Same thing when we're learning how to ration things and whatnot. And again, I would encourage you, instead of getting so fixated on what you're losing, two things. How can you take back some of your power through growing your own food, through collaborating with your neighbors to get what you need, through demonetizing your attachment to the things that are becoming more expensive? There are lots of ways you can share with your neighbors and reuse, recycle, all of those things. In my neighborhood, people put a lot of stuff on the curb and it's gone pretty quickly. And a lot of people here are upcyclers, where they'll take something that's like somewhat damaged and they'll fix it and they'll use it, right? There's a really beautiful sensibility in our community towards that. And the other thing that does is it stops the need for utilizing new things, of extracting more resources from this already overburdened planet to create fast fashion or create more things with materials. There's so much material that we could reuse that would be taken out of the economic stream that we feel like we're victims of, if that makes sense. I'm planting a lot of garden food. I'm planting a fruit forest, right? A food forest in my backyard, fruit trees. We're thinking of removing the asphalt in our driveways. We have too much driveway so that we can put more gardens in. We're getting to know our neighbors, and we're exchanging skills and resources with our neighbors, not necessarily in a monetary fashion, but in just a gift exchange kind of culture. To me, these are opportunities to start shifting to a more benevolent way of living. So to me, fearing the Mars-Pluto square should be an initiation to a new way of living. It's an opportunity. If we turn fear into opportunity, then fear has a place. Avoiding fear and becoming the completely overcome and overpowered by it, then it doesn't have a purpose. Every single emotion that we have has a purpose. Anger has a purpose. Fear has a purpose. Anxiety has a purpose. Sometimes we have anxiety because we know that if we don't do something, we'll miss our opportunity, and that gets us doing something. Sometimes we get angry at something that's unfair and unjust, and it helps us to rebalance. Sometimes we're afraid of not having something that we really need, or that we might lose, or the fear of whatever, but that encourages us to take action to alleviate that. So when you have a fear of scarcity, taking the actions to plant the seeds without hoarding, right? This isn't about hoarding. This isn't about going to your whatever big box store and just clearing out the toilet paper. This is about creating relationships and creating the possibility for abundance in the future. And sometimes you have to be patient with that process. So be very careful about demonizing others when it comes to this energy of scapegoating, of falling victim to both entitlement and fear of lack. Okay. I think that if you can really come to terms with the fact that we've been externalizing costs for centuries for our own comfort and for our own abundance at the expense of other countries and other civilizations, it makes this change a lot easier to deal with, in my opinion, because your expectations aren't one of, well, I deserve this. It's more of like balance is coming back to the force on some level, and maybe we can do things in ways that aren't exploitive and aren't extractive. And then you know what the funny thing is? You're not actually losing anything. You have everything to gain. It doesn't mean that you're going to starve. It means that you're richer in relationships. It means that you're richer in the ability to sleep at night with the ethical balance of not necessarily exploiting someone else for your own comfort. I can't tell you how valuable that is. So think about this in terms of what do we have to gain through this opportunity with the Mars-Pluto square? I guess on a practical level, be very careful about how you express anger, okay? Because the fear could be amplified by social circumstances, we could be acting out of character. But again, how do we use it as an opportunity to change and shift our lifestyles to one that is more equitable for all planetary citizens, all countries of this beautiful earth, all inhabitants of this earth, rather than exploiting a supply chain that is reliant on fossil fuels that pollute this earth and destroy habitat and civilizations? How do we become more localized, where we take that completely out of the equation? Not because we not because society wanted to, because they are forced to through necessity, right? See what I'm saying? Like sometimes human beings don't change until they have to. But as students of the stars, as students of larger systems of knowledge and trying to ground that in experience, when we embrace the opportunity to make those changes, then we're going through with the flow, right? So we might experience less suffering when it comes to the Mars-Pluto square, and when we see it as an opportunity to make very important changes to the way that we live our lives. Now that's also going to coincide with Mercury emerging as the evening star at 21 degrees of Gemini. So here's May 27th. And this is going to be just probably a lot of information around what stays and what goes. What do we need in life? What do we really not need? Maybe through a little bit of a tightening of our financial belts, we have to make some choices, some tough choices about what we can continue to do and what we can't. Like my partner and I are still paying for a bunch of streaming services that we don't even watch anymore. They may have to go. You know what I'm saying? Like that's an easy choice to make, because there are so many other forms of both entertainment and enrichment that could be even better, like books or going outside and doing things in your garden or talking to your neighbors rather than just getting lost in television or something like that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's opportunities that come through the choices that we make. Now, when we get to the 28th, once we've made those choices, now Venus is escaping its malefic enclosure on the 28th. Okay, it squares Saturn. This is Venus in the decan of Cancer that's associated with creating safe spaces of being able to nurture something to fruition in privacy, being able to grow something without it being threatened, protection. Saturn's in the overcoming square to Venus. So the necessity, to be able to strike out on our own, to do things because we are needing to make a new individualistic start, could be putting pressure on the group, could be putting pressure on us as trying to create community, because maybe some of the fear of scarcity leads to saying, I gotta do this for me. I gotta protect my own interests. You know, I would be careful of that, because I think that there are certain circumstances where that's appropriate, and there's other circumstances where that becomes really destructive. But that ends the malefic enclosure of Venus on the 28th. That builds to our full moon in Sagittarius. So here is the full moon, Sagittarius 1, 9 degrees of Sagittarius, opposite the Gemini moon, or Gemini sun, excuse me. And Mercury is really strong, hosting the sun. Also, the moon is being hosted by a very strong Jupiter, even though it's in aversion to it. So really strong planets hosting this full moon. This full moon is the balance between feeling stuck by so many options and then actually taking action and movement and with enthusiasm towards our chosen goal. So this might be a time where things start moving forward once again after feelings of being stuck. The other thing I'll say about Mars and Taurus is the challenge with Mars and Taurus often is one of inertia, where we have either difficulty stopping when we get started or difficulty getting started. So the finding the right pace, I think, is going to be important. At this full moon in Sagittarius, though, we might be just ready to get going. We're just like, let's take action. It might feel really like important in that moment. So that's the 31st. June, full moon coming up in Capricorn. Mercury and the sun move into Cancer. We've got a Mercury retrograde in Cancer 3 in June. Venus and Jupiter will move into Leo. Mars will move out of Taurus and into Gemini. And then we have a beautiful Venus-Jupiter conjunction in June. But also, right after it ingresses into Leo, we have an opposition to Pluto, Venus-Pluto opposition. So some positive things, some challenging things. That's the way it goes. All right, so that's the astrology for the next few weeks. Let's do an I-Ching. Let's do an animal. Hope that you're all doing well out there and finding some value in the explorations today. Thank you for joining me here. The I-Ching that I got for you. This is hexagram number 17. So here is hexagram 17 changing to hexagram 49. So 17 translates to following, allegiance, loyalty, adaptability, becoming adaptable. The judgment says, following supreme success, it is beneficial to be constant and steadfastly faithful. No blame. This hexagram concerns the obligations of followers and leaders, how to get others to follow you, and when and how to follow others. If you want others to follow you, you must know how to adjust yourself to them. In the words of the old Chinese proverb, to rule is to serve. No one can be a true leader who does not have sympathy for those in one's charge. You must adapt yourself to the demands of the time and the needs of your supporters. Then you will gain the respect and trust of others so that they will follow you with joy and gladness. If you try to gain mastery over over other people through force or fraud, or through conspiracy and connivance, you will poison social relationships and breed resentment and resistance. This is good advice while Venus is in malefic enclosure, right? Catch more flies with honey. You can't manipulate people into doing what you want. That just doesn't work. At most, you will gain control of only a faction that must suppress its opponents. If you win power through injuring others, this is good advice too for the Algol portion of the new moon. If you win power through injuring others, you will have to keep injuring them to maintain your base. Sounds a lot like our government right now. The injuries that you do to others will not fade away. They will haunt you later on. On the other hand, if you gain power through winning the trust and affection of others, they will give you the benefit of the doubt when you must make tough decisions that you feel are in the interest of all. When your leadership is established on trust rather than fear, you maintain your base of support by continuing to work on the behalf of those who follow you. They, in turn, will support your endeavors, and in this way, everyone will benefit. Okay? It's important if we're leading. All right? Now, there's a changing line here. It says 6 in the third place. All right? The third changing line. One clings to the strong man and loses the small boy. Through following, one gets what one seeks. It is beneficial to remain constant and steadfastly faithful. To succeed and to grow as a person, you must put aside inferior influences and superficial pleasures. You must let go of relationships and behaviors that you cling to out of familiarity but are no longer right for you. Okay, we got a lot of planets at the bending of the nodes, right? Remember we talked about letting go of old habits, old narratives, old whatever? Only in this way can you open yourself to new relationships with worthy people and to newer, healthier ways of living. The lesson of this line is that getting something better means giving up something worse. It is hard to give up old habits and forge new relationships, but you must have the courage to see things through. Be determined to put aside old self-destructive ways and follow a better path. If you can remain firm, you will get what you are seeking, and you will develop strength of character that will help you in the long run. And this is the repair notion of Taurus 3. How do we repair our relationship with ourselves, with our stories, with the ways that we are doing things? If one way of doing things isn't working out, we have to try something new. And that changes to hexagram number 49, revolution, molting, shedding old skin, metamorphosis, transformation, out with the old. The original meaning of this hexagram was to molt or shed one's skin. It was eventually extended to transformations generally, and in particular to changes in government. The three yang lines ascend powerfully into the middle of the hexagram, while another yang line follows close behind. This symbolizes the successive ways of upheaval that attend transformation. Transformations do not come in a single stroke, but in a series of disruptions to the established order until that order surrenders or fades away. Revolution means the abolition of an old order in preparation for a new one. Such drastic changes are appropriate only when there is no other alternative. If you are contemplating such a change, it is because you feel that things have gone as far as they can in their present form and something entirely new is called for. When you realize that the time has come for a revolution in your life, it is usually because you've already begun to experience a revolution in your heart. You may find yourself questioning long-held assumptions and beliefs, which is a great thing to do during Gemini season, right? As we move from Taurus to Gemini during this lunation cycle. What once seemed so central and important to you now begins to seem irrelevant and besides the point. All of this means that your values and expectations are changing. You have begun to see things in different ways, okay? It is dizzying and it leaves you uncertain, but it is a necessary precondition to transformation of your life. The name of this hexagram, Ge, I believe, Ge, compares this process to the shedding of an old skin in preparation for a new one. You should not be afraid of the changes that you want to make. Now more than ever, you need to have courage and faith in yourself. But before you proceed, you must think things through carefully. Take the time to consider the ramifications of what you are about to do. Radical change that is well motivated and properly prepared invigorates your life. Change that is reckless and ill-considered can be very destructive. Remember that you are not the only person that will be affected by the changes. You must take other people's feelings and interest into account. No one goes into a revolution alone. Whether by choice or by circumstances, one takes many others as well. You will need the support of others if you are to succeed in making a successful transformation. Okay. Good advice. We don't have to go through the revolution alone, right? It might feel like it with all the Aries planets right now, but we're more powerful when we unite with others to make changes. Now, I do have an animal for you. This is one I don't think I've gotten on the channel before. Since I've started doing random number generations, I've gotten more mythological creatures from this beautiful book, Animal Frequency. And this week, I got the unicorn. So check this out, this unicorn. Gorgeous. I'm going to read to you from Animal Frequency. Melissa Alvarez, an excellent, excellent author. Unicorn symbolizes purity, innocence, faith, intuition, and enchantment. It is all that is right within the universe and is a connection to the higher realms of spirituality. It signifies the higher self, a gentle nature, a pure heart, and a loving and giving nature. Peace and inner calm, righteousness, and a belief in things others may not see. It has talents for being a connection to all that is, a giving heart, beauty, innocence, kindness, patience, perfection, positive beliefs, purity, spirituality, unity, virtue, and wisdom. It has challenges around being naive, flighty, impractical expectations, a tendency to live in a fantasy world. Unicorns often appear when it's time to connect to your core essence, inner being, and higher self. It can mean your spirit guides are trying to reach you, but you're not listening. When you see unicorn, stop what you're doing and listen telepathically for unique messages. It means to believe in yourself and have faith that everything will work out how the universe intends. Connecting with unicorn means to delve into your own exceptional creativity and to open yourself to the enchanting ways of the mystical realms, to believe in your intuition and psychic abilities. It means it's time to experience spiritual growth and to discover the mysteries of the universe. You are pure of heart and connected to the divine. This animal can assist you when you're experiencing spiritual growth, when you're working on developing your intuition or psychic abilities and are connecting with your spirit guides. It helps when you're searching for meaning in your life. Unicorn helps you learn the patience to have faith in that which you cannot see. If you've been feeling out of sorts or stressed, Unicorn helps you to see the miracles in your life. Just go look at a David Attenborough video or series if you want to see some miracles in life. I'll tell you what, happy birthday to that guy. What a beacon of light. He's a unicorn in this world for sure. If you've lost touch with the beauty of your relationship with the world around you, Unicorn helps you to see with a sense of wonder and awe. Again, go check out that new Oceans documentary by David Attenborough. Talk about wonder and awe and a different way of seeing the planet. I love it. If you feel burdened with too much responsibility or feeling depressed or anxious, Unicorn helps to clear away the negativity, release judgmental tendencies, and replace these with the positive lightness of being. Unicorn can travel throughout the universe so it can guide you during your own travels. Seeing Unicorn means to trust in your instincts and soul's essence, your true nature. Unicorn allows you to see purity and beauty in everything. I like that. I'll take it. You know, sometimes we need to get in touch with that innocent part of ourselves. When we're bombarded with things that make us afraid, things that make us angry, things that rise the injustice, indignation within us, just reconnecting with some of the purity can be really important. And I think that this is a great way to do so, getting in touch with our unicorn spirit. I love it. Shadowfax vibes, Rachel says. Absolutely. Shadowfax being the pure white horse in The Lord of the Rings, the leader of the horses, I guess you could say, a divine being that Gandalf himself was the steward of. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. Thank you so much for hanging out today. Thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for inhabiting this beautiful planet and shining your light and your gifts with others. Try to shine that light and those gifts with the spirit of generosity. The world needs the best version of yourself right now. And if you could put that out into the world and shine your light and cultivate those gifts and share them with others, I think you can do a lot of good in the world. And all these shifts and changes that we're going through are opportunities to do good in this world. You know, Mr. Rogers always said, look for the helpers, especially when we're going through things that cause suffering or experiencing suffering. Look for the helpers. Look to see what kind of contribution you can make to alleviate other suffering and to get what you need, but also to provide what others need as well. It's all about balance, really. How do we become balanced and healthy instead of out of whack, chaotic, etc.? How do we bring that Taurus stability back into our lives? That's a good thing to consider, and a lot of good meditations for this week and the weeks ahead. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. Thank you for being here, friends. Thank you, Stella, for being here as well. Thank you for the beautiful earth-colored hearts. I love it. Be kind to one another. Be kind to yourself. Remember when we were talking about the algal energy? You don't want to direct that energy necessarily internally. You don't want to lose your head. You want to use that strong protective energy to protect the innocent, protect people that need help in your communities. And then you can be a powerful, powerful force of nature for protection. So be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another's. And we'll get through this. We'll get through the Mars-Pluto square. We'll get through it. Again, it comes through building strong communal ties. Become the mycelial network of your community, the connection, the underground connection that mushrooms have that connect resources from tree to tree. I saw this beautiful thing where trees, when one tree is felled, The other trees actually provide nutrients for it to keep the stump alive for sometimes decades. So I mean, and it's sometimes cross species. So let's be like those trees and those mycelial networks that help each other, even if some of us are being cut down and are being othered and being scapegoated. How do we become the mycelial network that can support them in times of need? All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. Have a great day. Javier says, "Ooh, stump talk." I love all of you. Have a great weekend. Have a great few weeks ahead. Go outside. Appreciate being incarnated in these bodies and on this planet. There's so much beauty here on this earth, and we can be the stewards to protect it. Okay, we can be the Captain Planets reference to like Ted Turner, who created Captain Planet. We can embody some of that energy, I think, moving forward. So we'll see you the next time. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.